Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we journey back in time, descending into the cold, damp dungeons of medieval Europe. We are not here to explore tales of knights and castles, but to confront a darker truth, to gaze upon a symbol of calculated agony so infamous that its very name has become a whisper of fear through the centuries. We are here to uncover the history of a device, engineered not just to break the body, but to systematically dismantle the human soul. The rack on the surface. It was nothing more than a wooden frame with rollers, ropes, and levers, yet this deceptively simple design concealed a purpose of unparalleled malevolence. It was terror incarnate. Imagine, if you will, a low-ceiling chamber, the air thick with the smell of mildew and despair. In its center sat a large horizontal wooden frame, a bed-like structure, illuminated by the flickering light of a single torch. This was the stage upon which countless dramas of pain, confession, and death were performed. This was not merely a device. It was a calculated mechanical executioner used to rip open the truth, or at the very least extract a confession even if none existed. The primary objective of the rack was not a swift punishment, but a slow, methodical extraction of information. It was a tool of interrogation, designed to make the victim's own body their worst enemy. The torturer, often a man desensitized to human suffering, was a grim artist. He knew precisely how much pressure to apply, how long to hold attention, and when to offer a moment of false hope, before plunging the victim back into an ocean of agony, all in the relentless quest for a confession or a name. Why such cruelty? Because in medieval Europe, a confession was everything. Not just evidence, the procedure was a masterpiece of cruel mechanics. The victim was laid upon the frame, their ankles bound by ropes to the roller at one end, and their wrists to the roller at the other. With the turn of a handle, the rollers would slowly begin to rotate in opposite directions, pulling the ropes taut. This was not a quick, merciful snap, but a deliberate and agonizingly slow stretch, designed to maximize terror and psychological torment. It was a process deliberately prolonged to break the prisoner's spirit and force them to speak in the initial moments. An excruciating strain would shoot through the victim's muscles. Every fiber in their arms and legs would feel as if it were being stretched. To the point of tearing, this first wave of fiery pain was a prelude, a horrifying introduction to the nightmare that was to unfold. It was the body's first desperate signal that its physical limits were being approached, a signal the torturer would gleefully ignore. Victims didn't pass out from blood loss. They remained conscious, trapped in torment beyond words. As the executioner continued to turn the wheel, the tension would move from the muscles to the very skeleton. The victim would hear a series of horrifying sounds, a sickening wet pop echoing through the chamber. This was the sound of their joint shoulders, elbows, hips, and knees being dislocated, pulled from their sockets. One by one, the human form, contorted and unnaturally elongated, would lose all semblance of its original shape. It was at this juncture that the human will often collapsed. The mind, unable to process the overwhelming onslaught of pain, would seek only one thing: release. This was the moment a victim might confess to anything, to treason, to witchcraft, to heresy, regardless of the truth. The words spoken were not a product of memory or guilt, but a desperate bargain for an end to the torment. Imagine saying anything just to make it stop. Yet for those who possessed an unbreakable will, or for torturers determined to inflict the ultimate suffering, the ordeal did not stop at dislocation. Further turning of the wheel would cause bones to fracture, ribs would crack under the immense strain, and in the most extreme applications, the spine itself could be stretched to the point of snapping, resulting in instant paralysis or a gruesome death. Those who survived this final stage were left as broken shells, often crippled for life. The rack was designed for maximum pain with minimum mercy, capable of prolonging torture for hours, even days. While the rack is most famously associated with the Middle Ages, its lineage of cruelty is far more ancient. Primitive forms of this device were used by the ancient Greeks and Romans, primarily for interrogating slaves, as their testimony was considered valid only if extracted under torture. However, it was during the medieval period, particularly between the 13th and 17th centuries, that the rack was perfected and integrated into the formal systems of state and religious justice. It became a favorite instrument of kings, inquisitors, and judges. Nowhere was its use more systematic and terrifying than during the Spanish Inquisition, sanctioned by the Church in the late 15th century. The Inquisition employed the rack as a primary tool to force confessions from those accused of heresy. The goal was to maintain religious purity through terror, and the rack became the ultimate instrument of that terror. Its mere presence in the interrogation chamber, often enough to elicit a confession without it even being used. Heretics were broken not just physically, But spiritually in England, the rack had a slightly different but equally sinister purpose. Housed within the infamous Tower of London, its use was legally sanctioned only for crimes against the state, such as high treason. A warrant signed by the monarch or the Privy Council was required, lending a terrifying legitimacy to the act. Originally nicknamed the Duke of Exeter's daughter, its arrival often heralded silence just before the screams began. It was a tool not of religious persecution, but of political power, used to unravel conspiracies and silence dissent against the crown. The terrible irony of the rack was the inherent unreliability of the evidence it produced. Philosophers and legal thinkers, even at the time, recognized that a person in such agony would say whatever their tormentors wanted to hear. The truth extracted was often a mere echo of the questions asked, a fabricated narrative constructed solely to stop the pain, making the entire process a grotesque and futile exercise in cruelty. History is littered with the names of those who felt the rack's wrath. Consider the fate of Guy Fawkes, the infamous conspirator behind the gunpowder plot of 1605. Subjected to the rack in the Tower of London, the machine eventually broke him. The confession he signed bore a spidery, almost illegible signature, a haunting testament to the agony endured. Then there is the haunting story of St. Nicholas Owen, a Jesuit builder who, despite relentless torture on the rack, refused to betray sanctuaries or names, dying under the strain, his silence a defiant victory. Nor was this barbarity reserved for men alone and Askew. An English poet and Protestant preacher accused of heresy in 1546 was also condemned to the rack when the lieutenant of the tower refused to torture her further. Horrified by her resilience, the Lord Chancellor and another counselor took over the levers. Themselves driven by fanatical zeal, despite having her joints pulled apart, she never renounced her faith and was later burned at the stake. To survive the rack was a curse in itself. A survivor was often a shadow of their former self, their body permanently ruined, with dislocated joints that never healed properly, and muscles torn beyond repair. They faced a lifetime of chronic pain and disability. The physical scars were horrific, but they paled in comparison to the psychological trauma, the memory of the sounds, the sensations, and the utter helplessness. The end of the rack's reign of terror came with the dawning of a new era, the Age of Enlightenment in the 18th century. Thinkers like Voltaire and Cesare Beccaria championed reason, human rights, and the reform of justice. They fiercely argued that torture was not only morally reprehensible, but also a flawed and irrational method for discovering truth, slowly turning the tide of public and legal opinion against it. This new wave of thought led to gradual legal reforms, and the eventual prohibition of such instruments. Gradually, nation by nation, this brutal practice was abolished. Sweden banned it in 1772, France during its revolution in 1789, and other nations followed throughout the 19th century. In England, torture was outlawed. By the 17th century, the official abandonment of the rack marked a pivotal moment in the evolution of Western law, a formal acknowledgement that the dignity of the individual must be protected even in the face of accusation. Today, the few remaining racks sit silent in museums, cold and inanimate artifacts of a bygone era. But they are not merely objects of wood and iron. They are solemn storytellers' warnings. They speak of a time when the screams of the innocent were the sound of justice. They compel us to remain vigilant in our own time, reminding us that the line between civilization and barbarism is one we must vigilantly guard forever. For the rack wasn't a tool of the insane or the evil alone. It was used by states, by courts, by societies claiming to be civilized. If this journey through history has compelled you to reflect and to understand more about the past's dark lessons, then there is more to explore on our channel. Don't miss future explorations into forgotten stories and crucial warnings. Hit that subscribe button now and join our community, dedicated to uncovering the profound truths of history. And as we continue our quest for understanding, be sure to turn on notifications so you are ready for our next deep dive into the chronicles of human experience.